Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us once again on Pont the Politique, a special conversation that we're going to be having. Kuthando lwethu kadlanga lona umuntu ongawuyengwayo malinge undima kankumbuzo umntana enkosi yena ongathi inkosi emntwini ngoba uyinkosi ngokwakhe uyanamkela kwakhona kule nkqubo yakapont the Politique. Namhlanje is the 31 of May 2023 and we were called in by popular demand to bring in another voice in the conversation around the Bulhoek Massacre, Enoch Mgijima, and AmaSirayeli. And I'm sorry to say this, over the past few days, I was a little bit unwell. Even now, I'm not 100% well, but for the purposes of this conversation, I wanted to ensure that I come back and make sure that this particular guest that we're having this afternoon is able to be part and parcel of the conversation. If you are new into this platform, we're available on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, and all of those social media platforms. Importantly, I would like to urge all of you who are going to be watching this or who are watching it live currently to please subscribe on our YouTube channel so that you can be able to meet us almost every time when we've got videos that we are putting across, and we appreciate that you are part and parcel of the family. Sinethemba loba le nkqubo yakapont the Politique izawukhula and izawukhuliswa nini. Igama likapont the Politique bayathanda ke unibuza abantu abaninzi bathi yemntungwa xa uthetha ngopont the Politique idibana phi ngoku le nto kapont the Politique. Pont the Politique means bridge to politics in English language. Indlela eya kwipolitiko. We chose this particular approach because we thought that it would be important as to how to interrogate some political aspects and some political issues that are not normally spoken about at a mass media platforms. So it is for this reason that we had opted for Pont the Politique. But also, let me take this opportunity to inform all those who are also watching that the hoodie that I'm wearing, including the others, one of these hoodies are for sale at our merchandise shop. We have them, they're beautiful. You can contact us in any other way that you want. You will be able to get them at the cost price of 400 rands. It's winter and it's time that we can support each other's like businesses. Today, I've got one of the sons of the prophet, Odwa Masiba. Odwa Masiba is from Cape Town. He's born and raised in Cape Town, but
no, Queenstown.
No, in Queenstown. Okay, Odwa is born in Queenstown, but is raised in Cape Town, eKapa. Odwa ngumzukulwana kwaSirayeli, who is a child of the inkonzo yamaSirayeli. Ngumntwana wakwaSirayeli. The same thing that I did when I spoke about uZolani Masoleng. Odwa is also the child of kwaSirayeli. Mntaka Masiba, thanks for joining us, sir.
The pleasure is all mine, sir.
Siyabulela man uthatha elithuba lokuba ube kunye nathi namhlanje, and we apologize for the delay start time. It is the owners of means of production did not give back the electricity at the time that they had promised. So we apologize for that.
No problem, Anya.
Okay. Odwa ke viewers at home is going to speak on a perspective that we had been speaking about over the past week or so around the Bulhoek Massacre and the Bulhoek Commemoration. And I want to ask these questions upfront to Odwa so that we can be able to put them to the side. Odwa, are you a part of the church currently?
I'm not. I was born part of the church. I will never be any would be the opposite of being part of the church. I am a member of the Church of God and Saints of Christ. According to our belief, currently, I am not an active member, as in I'm not inactive in service in my position as a trustee of Nxele for internal political reasons, and that is my position.
Okay, so you are not an active member of the church. And secondly, when we engage with you here,
yes,
are you speaking on behalf of the church, or you are speaking on behalf of Odwa Masiba?
I'm not speaking. Nobody has the right to speak on behalf of the church. In my understanding, the church doesn't have an information office, and in my understanding, if anybody is going to come to a platform where he speaks on behalf of the church, it should be by selection by the church itself. Inkonzo kaIsrael is based on what we call imiyalelo yomprofiti, and according to my personal knowledge, one of the imiyalelo yomprofiti is that a church, as an ibandla or inkonzo in itself, cannot be broadcasted. But we find ourselves in a position where inkonzo is being broadcasted, and inkonzo does not have in itself a capacity or a way of responding to the broadcast that are being spread about inkonzo, which are most of them like disinformation. So I'm not taking it up to myself, but I feel like someone has to do something about it. So I'm standing up for the church, not on behalf of the church, but as a service to the Prophet Enoch Mgijima.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And lastly, you reluctantly agreed to be part of this conversation.
Because it did not elect me.
It is because of that. But you do have your perspectives around the issues in relation to the church, the Bulhoek Massacre, even Obaumlind, and everything else that you have perspective about. And when I was playing the video of Lamfupeti Zembe, the president was carrying an axe and running up and down in the lounge, I saw you laughing. What came to your mind?
I've heard about the video, and I've made a great effort not to watch the video, because I thought, in my own opinion, that this was going to be offensive. But when I saw it, this was the first time seeing it, was quite hilarious, I must say.
Actually, it is, and there are others that are equally hilarious. And if you look at them, the majority of them, they might be offensive to certain people, but also they might be hilarious to certain people. What I picked up from them was that there are two things that are happening there. There was a question of, firstly, when we don't know something, we then take it for granted, and therefore we'll make fun of it. But also at the same time, in the age of social media, that particular video had created what is called Isankwe, social media, about who are these people, what is it that they are doing, and I thought it gave us an opportune time to be able to interrogate these particular things. So I saw you laughing at it, and I was like, okay, there's probably something there that you would like.
I find it very hilarious, and after I spoken to you yesterday, I kind of went online and tried to do my own research just to cap on some of the stuff that I know, and I came across a quote that says that sometimes ridicule, which is what everybody perceives, is in those like a TikTok as a ridicule to inkonzo, but I learned that sometimes ridicule is the mediocratic people's way of paying homage to genius. I think that guy is paying homage to genius that is.
I think so too. I'm sorry, Odwa. I've got a slight problem with my throat, and therefore I struggle at times to maintain my voice. But I hope you accept my apology. My brother, you were speaking to me when we spoke. We are getting onto the conversation. when we spoke about these things, we were talking about the particular perspectives around the Bulhoek Massacre, Enoch Mgijima, and Ibandla, the church, Inkonzo AmaSirayeli. And you had something that was very particular and that was very peculiar for me that you presented, and you said to me, there is a way of how you understand Enoch Mgijima, the church, including the repercussions of the church, which is the Bulhoek Massacre. And you proclaimed them in the way that there is a way to understand. You can't understand Mgijima from a Western knowledge system. You need to use certain lenses for you to be able to understand the Bulhoek Massacre, Enoch Mgijima, and Nxele AmaSirayeli. And on the basis of that, the May month is a month of the Bulhoek Massacre. Now, would you be able to tell us what is your view, what is your thinking of how to look at a Bulhoek Massacre? And maybe if we move from that, we can then be able to go back. I'm saying to go back to Mgijima, we go back to Nxele AmaSirayeli, in the understanding that Uti, there is an eastern side, abantu baseMpumalanga, there is a western side, abantu baseNtshona. Take us and begin with us your understanding of Bulhoek Massacre from your perspective.
Okay. First, let me just make this clear. Inkonzo AmaSirayeli in its basic format, sisintu, right? Isintu has no room for opinions. We don't deal with opinions, Isintu. We deal with facts. So in my discussion with you yesterday is I said in the previous interviews that we did with most people, you were asking them for their opinions. As in we don't deal with opinions. We don't have room for opinions. We have a room for facts. So one of the things that I pointed out to you is that Enoch Mgijima had a context. That's what people tend to want to forget, that he had a context. He had a historical context. He had a political context. He had a cultural context. He had an economic context. He didn't just like Zanga Pakanyiswe nje elubala. Enoch wasn't trying to build a castle in the sky. He was trying to solve pertinent problems that were facing people of that time. So I said, in order for us to understand Enoch Mgijima, we must first understand his context. I'm not sure then what's the pattern of the interviews, that I should continue with that, or you're going to ask me questions after each and every statement that I make.
No. You can continue with that particular approach, because it will be some of the things that we will interrogate. We will interrogate them based on those submissions that you're making, and even the people who are watching who want to make comments, who will then raise those comments and questions as you are talking, because even the talk itself, it's part of raising some comments and questions.
Okay, cool. Okay, so my basic premise of argument, which I've raised among my co-religionists, is that the world tend to want to understand Enoch according to the world's terms. But Enoch wasn't of the world. What do I mean by the world? It is general understanding that physically the world is divided into two. You've got the northern hemisphere and then you got the southern hemisphere. But mentally, spiritually, or psychologically, or philosophically, for that matter, the world is only divided into two: the east and the west. And so when you speak of Enoch Mgijima, you have to first understand what was his context. I'm going to explain what do I mean about the difference between the Eastern thought, which I mentioned to you last night, the difference between Eastern thought and Western thought. So the primary context of Enoch Mgijima. First of all, Enoch Mgijima was born in 1868. So he was 5 years old during the Langalibalele rebellion. That might not mean something to you today, listening to me talking about his relationship to Langalibalele rebellion, but to people of his time, that was a major event. Enoch was 9 or 10. I'll say he was around about 9 or 10 during the rebellion against Somtse. He was about the same age during the collapse of the dynasty Amachaba. And these events compose his historical context of that time, right? And so with that collapse of the known world to our ancestors of the time, which is like ubukhosi bamachawe nobukumkani bamakhosi akwaZulu and njalo 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 njalo, that was sort of like the end of the world to them as they know it, right? So they needed new ideas, these people. They needed new moral values. They needed and new understanding and new clarity. It is to be understood that in our history, it is recorded, I think is one of the observers of our predecessors. I'm very wary to say our ancestors, because that word has been misused lately. But our predecessors, one of the early observers of our predecessors, said that their ultimate goal was to achieve joy. So sitlasibulisa thina AmaSirayeli, uya umbulise omnye umSirayeli umbuze ba unjani, athi ndigcobile emoyeni wesiprofetisha. And with that said, for a people whose main objective was to achieve joy, it is to be understood in the context of Mgijima and ukuphakanyiswa kwakhe that abantu bexesha likaMgijima, they were people of knowledge. Isintu in itself is a culture that it's a culture, it's a knowledge, it's a culture of knowledge. There is nothing abantu that abayivishayo nebayixabisayo njenge-knowledge. And you can't have then a joyful heart when you don't have a clarity of mind. So one of the things that in the context of ukuphakanyiswa komgijima, one of the things that was bothering abantu bexesha lakhe was the obscurity that was happening at that time and the lack of clarity of the ideas that were floating at that time. We should also understand that in the context of ukuphakanyiswa komgijima, the most dominant voice that was heard was the Western voice, and that was the missionary voice. So they were struggling against the ideas that were being brought by the missionaries, and they needed people who can clarify the path for them in the absence of the chiefs, which were normally the moral authorities of the time. So people were walking all over the place looking for moral authorities, and Enoch Mgijima was one of the people that actually didn't see an opportunity to bridge that gap, but was identified by the people that as one of the people who could help the people to fill that gap. So umphakanyiswa komprofite Mgijima, my argument is that it had a historical context which we should not forget when we deal with the issue of Bulhoek Massacre. One of the things that are floating around, the ideas that are floating around, is Guti Enoch Mgijima was a liberation leader. We tend to forget that Uguti at that time, there was no need for a liberation leader because the people were not oppressed. That was the time or the period of resistance in our history. So what Enoch Mgijima did was an extension of what Maqoma has started, the resistance against colonialism. It was an extension of what Ulanga Lebalele was doing, the resistance against colonialism. And it was an extension of what Utechwayo did and what Usandile okanye Usahili did, which was the resistance against colonialism. So we need to first understand that Enoch was a resistant leader at his time. He was raised at a time when people needed a resistant leader against the imposition of Utjubel, the British imperialistic attitudes. And get on the forefront of that were the missionaries who were pushing the agenda of conquest from the pulpit. And one of the things that they did was to attack our culture and to demonize our culture. And so the people needed people like Enoch, who was trying to provide them with answers against Christianity or I prefer to call it missionarism. And Nxele lika Ntsikana, he provided them with Ntsikana and abanye abaprofiti, and even later after Mgijima, he provided them with abantu abanjengoNontetha Nkwenkwe. So Prophet Mgijima comes from that context, a context of resistance. But how he differs, or how he differs from his predecessors, is that ukuphakama kwakhe ekuqaleni, it wasn't about military action. The military action came later. Ukuphakama kwakhe ekuqaleni, it was about ideas, and one of his goals was to not clarify, but really to provide clarity ebantwini. And one of the things that comes into mind when I think about this, that you can't have a joyful heart if you don't Okuti, what draws you guys to Enoch? Why do you guys go to Enoch? He said Enoch clarifies things in a way that even an idiot like me can understand. So that was his context. I would like to end there for now, Chairman. But the issue that I want to raise is that Enoch had a context, and we cannot try to understand or try to explain. I've seen a lot of people who are trying to explain Enoch Mgijima, and they try to explain him but completely ignoring that he had a context. So his context was political, his context was historical, his context was economical at that time. You understand?
No, I hear you, and thank you very much. I didn't want to stop you. There were some points that I wanted to interrogate. I actually need you to clarify them, because it helps us not only with us but also with those who are watching, so that they can be able to understand what you mean. I want you to be able to clear the ideas according to you, the resistance in relation to liberation. Just clarify us with that.
One of the things that you will notice in his communication with the English, when the English asked him about the issue of occupation of the land in Dabelang, his response was very simple, that he got his permission from his chief, Chief Mhlambis. All right? So for us living in this age, we tend to think ukuthi abantu ababephila ngexesha likaMgijima, they were under colonial rule, but most of them didn't feel that way. The whole thing about colonial rule was very new at that time. You must remember, Enoch started preaching in 1907. This country this country was not consolidated into the common. Was it called a Commonwealth? But it wasn't consolidated. The country wasn't consolidated under British rule up until 1910.
And on the basis of that, I just need you to give me a clear understanding, so that when we talk about liberation in your thinking and resistance in your thinking, it is in relation to what? When we say liberation, we're talking it in relation to this, and resistance in relation to this.
Liberation kukhululwa kwamabanjwa ebukhamandeleni, right? There has to be some form of action for there to be liberation, right? But in the times of Enoch, people were resisting British rule. They were not. The Britain was imposing its rule on the people, and the people were saying, "No, asnazi thina sazamakhosi namachawa."
Okay. No, I hear that particular point. The second one is, why do you think it is important to contextualize Mgijima and the Bulhoek Massacre? Why is that particularly important?
I came to this discussion with the notion that the world was ridiculing us, but after I saw that video, I've changed that perception. It is important that we contextualize Enoch, so that people can understand that the problems that Enoch was trying to solve were not isolated from the national problems of this country. One of the things that Enoch did was in around the time that he was raised, he didn't have like a racial context that we have now, the thing of black and white. The people were not divided by race. The idea of dividing people by the skin color as a form of racial distinction is completely new to us. It's a modern social construct. The people of Enoch's time, their biggest problem was tribalism. That was the biggest problem that they had. The people who came from the Nxele area, they came saying that Ntsikana had prophesied the coming of Enoch Mgijima. And it's something that we recite all the time in Gonzo, where we say that Ntsikana said to Nxele, so that's very important, that our ancestors, they couldn't fight British imperialism because they were divided along tribal lines, and they couldn't find anybody who could solve that problem. And one of the things that Enoch did was he solved that problem. That is why our ancestors, his early followers, called him Umhlanganiswe Mihlambelana. If you look at the tombstone, the commemoration tombstone, if you look at the surnames that are listed there, those are people from completely different tribes, from completely walks of life. You got Abatembu there, you got AmaXhosa of the House of Park, the members of the House of Park. You got Abatembu, you've got Imintungwa, you've got Amahlubi, you've got Tabatswana, you've got Amandebele, you've got people coming from all walks of life. Enoch was the first person to actually achieve that, to integrate those fractured tribal societies. So it is important so that the ordinary guy should not think that Uguti Ingonzo Yakaswahili is some random thought, some random church. Ingonzo Yakaswahili started off as a resistant movement trying to solve a national problem.
Okay. I see, and I've got my answer to what I was looking for, and I'm still saying to the viewers who are watching with us, please put across your comments and questions for Odwa Masiba so that we can pose them to him, and he will try and answer. I don't want this to be my conversation. I want it to be his conversation, and it will make it easy for us to be able to further go forward in the conversation. Now, here the Bulhoek comes, and after all this context that you have brought about. Now, teach us about how you understand. I'm always saying this thing because some people might have a different take on the very same point or the same event or the same processes that we are talking about. I'm not saying that the facts are different. I'm saying people have got different opinions, perspectives, and how they view things. Bangawubona umthi omnye abona isikhepe kanti omnye ubona itafile, omnye ubona whatever that they are saying. So teach us from your understanding as when we look at commemorating the Bulhoek Massacre, when we look at remembering Umlindi Israel, and when we look at Inkonzo AmaSirayeli as a whole, teach us as to how would you want us in the world to see these particular three distinct but interrelated aspects?
I think in our conversation yesterday, the first question that you asked me was in relation to the Bulhoek Massacre, and I said to you, I cannot speak about the Bulhoek Massacre. My only concern, or the only thing, I think that's when I stopped being reluctant to speak to you, was that like the only thing that I can ever talk about is the context yokuvuka komprofethi Enoch Mgijima, because that's very important. When it comes to a Bulhoek Massacre, first of all, I've got a problem with the word or the term Bulhoek Massacre. When I was growing up in Sibaliselwa ngenkonzo, Sibaliselwa nge-event in itself, enkonzweni, it was never presented to us as a defeat. It was never presented us to a defeat. Yes, the story was clearly that we lose in the end, but it was presented to us as a story of victory. So first of all, I got a problem with the word Bulhoek Massacre. The people who died there were not killed in their sleep. They're not people who were killed in their sleep. I didn't even know the word Bulhoek Massacre until I learned about it in school. I think I was in grade 10 or grade 8, and the teacher was talking about these people that got killed and stuff. I was really lost until he mentioned Enoch Mgijima's name, and I raised my hand and I said, "Are you talking about the Prophet Mgijima?" He says, "Yeah, you know about it." I said, "Yeah, but Engonzweni, we don't know it as Bulhoek Massacre. We know it's Imfazwe Mgijima." And that brings back to the context. Imfazwe Mgijima should be seen as an extension of the frontier wars. It should be seen as an extension of resistance. It should be seen as an extension of rebellion. It should not be seen as like a massacre. People got killed for worshipping. Those people are not worshipping. They were doing more than worshipping. They were standing up for what they believed in.
What about the limitation of the language, the usage of words? Remember, the European colonial rule created a situation where we have to use certain words. And when I've identified two things that you have done. When you speak about ukuvuswa kukam prophet, and you say this thing in your isiXhosa language. But also now you just raise another aspect yokuthi thina we never understood it as a massacre. Siyazi njengemfazwe kaMgijima. So what is an impact of a language, the usage of a language in defining these particular items, because these particular events? Because you said you want to look at these things in the context of these two worldviews, the Western and the Eastern. Take us through that part.
I think I'll always drag this conversation back to context. Engonzweni mna ndikhule, we were addressed as abantu abahle baseMpumalanga. And growing up in Eastern Cape, I used to think like it's a reference to Eastern Cape, that singabantu abahle base Eastern Cape. Until I was much older and I started like reading extensively, and I learned that Uguti, those people, Tina, we might not be aware of that. We're not even aware that we're Westernized. We're not even aware, Uguti, our indigenous way of thinking is Eastern. We're not aware of those things. But those people who lived in times as Mgijima, they were aware of that. They were not so educated that they could, out of nowhere, identify themselves as abantu abahle baseMpumalanga. One of the appellation, I don't know if it's the correct word now to appellation. Every leader is doing unezibongo zakhe, right? So I think that it's appellation. But isithakazelo, one of his thakazelos zomprofiti Enoch Mgijima is indlovu ephondoluni ekhanisela umpondombini waseMpumalanga. And that is lifted out of his bongos, where he's being identified as, so it says indlovu ephondoluni yaseMpumalanga ekhanisela umpondombini wasentshonalanga. So the literal translation of that is like a one-horned elephant of the east that stood up against a two-horned elephant of the west. The common interpretation when you study Bongos Kapungani is that indlovu esintwini is like a leader. So a one-horned elephant, that's an under-resourced leader. A canisela that stands up against a two-horned elephant. A two-horned elephant in that context will be a heavily resourced leader. So Enoch Mgijima, to the mind of the people that follow him at this time, and to his admirers, people were admiring him, people who were contemporaries of the people who were following him at that time. So I'm meaning to say that to people of his time, in general, he was standing up against the West.
To raise this question again, I need the clarity of it. When I'm talking about the languaging, the problems of language, the problems of ukuyibiza inhlekele yaseNtabelanga njenge massacre. Isn't that the problems with which you are raising, to therefore say even how we view the world currently is westernized to a point that we have accepted to refer to the imfazwe yaseNtabelanga as a Bulhoek Massacre. Kanti in the Xhosa traditional language, xa uzawuthi imfazwe kaMgijima and you want to translate it to isiNgesi, you would have some limitations there. Yes. What is the problem? Because I need the clarity on this point. What is the problems of English in interpreting Enoch Mgijima, Bulhoek Massacre, and AmaSirayeli? Let me go there.
Thank you. What are you in this instance, Chairman? Thank you, Chairman, for raising that question again. I did hear that question, but in my articulation, I realized that I don't correctly identify Enoch as an Eastern leader, or how the people of his time perceive them in terms of like Eastern thought, right? The language is a code of a people's psyche. A language is a code of how people think, right? So the problem that I've seen when you interviewed one of our elders, church elders, the Honorable Evangelist CM Tokota, a gold mine, Yebandla, if I may say, was that you can't explain Eastern ideas in English. I saw that you were asking questions, and one of my comments to one of my friends was, I wish uDlanga ebembuze umvangeli ngeXhosa isizinto. Enkonzweni, when I was growing up, isiXhosa was the lingua franca yasenkonzweni. If you were to stand up enkonzweni uthethe English, people will look down at you. And even in society, umuntu othetha isiXhosa in its purest form was considered sophisticated. Intsha lento ngoku yothetha kwethu English. And that brings a lot of limitation in how we think, because our minds are not designed for Western ideas. And so when you say that Udaba laseNtabelanga, like it's a massacre, to me it projects a sense of inferiority, that we were defeated. You know, when you say imfazwe yaseNtabelanga, that becomes different, because we know, if we look into the context of the word imfazwe, that is the in English they loosely translate it into the imfazwe, death of no. They say the chief had to declare a war by saying ilizwe lifile. The word comes from there. The Xhosa chiefs, on declaring the war, they will say ilizwe lifile. And so the translation that we have from early Xhosa observers and academics is that the land is dead. Right? That brings us to a context as Ntabelanga. Today we have a lot of intolerances. We got sucrose intolerance. We got this intolerance and that intolerance. The people of Ntabelanga, the people of Enoch Mgijima's time, they had only one intolerance, and that was injustice. They were very intolerant to injustice. So I'm going to the language. So our pre-colonial society was a litigious society, right? If you look at the Book of Law of Yamachau, I think there's a book by General McLean, I think. It says the Compendium of Kafir Laws and Custom. You should read that book. It states the law of Amachau. In the law of Amachau, it was illegal for a man to raise his hand on another man. Even in self-defense, the law said. So the people live in a very, very litigious society. So their only concern was justice, right? So the concept of like ilizwe lifile, so humanity rests on justice. the feel of Ubuntu, like a community, rest on the presence of justice. So it is said that the pre-colonial South African societies, if you didn't want to cooperate with them, so what they did was, like, all the nations or the tribes that have agreement of collaboration, they will then create a moral society. But if your tribe, which was mostly the case Yabelungu, they will refuse to play by the rules that benefit all tribes, then our pre-colonial society will then, like, disqualify them and put them outside of the moral community, right? And so the moral community continues to exist under the guise of justice and under the moral code of Ubuntu. You couldn't. One of the early observers of our pre-colonial predecessors, he says it was very hard to get them agitated. It was very hard to anger them. They were very calm people who occupied, I think I mentioned earlier, that who occupied themselves with the idea of mngcwabo or joy. So in order to bring them into like a war situation, the chief had to declare to them, "Good, like Ubuntu pelile," because Ubuntu was the nation itself. So he says, like the nation is dead. And you make me feel like it was people who were sleeping and they came and the English came and then they killed them. But when you say Imfazwe, I know that they were standing up for justice. So they declared, those are religious people. Those are religious people, or the world wants to remember them as religious people to an extent. But when you say that in Utabara Sintabelanga, Imfazwe Kamkichim, then you give us Inyoba to explain why they had to fight.
Okay, I see that point, and thanks again for putting that across. And I hope that the viewers are able to pick up these small gems that are coming through. Earlier, you spoke about a number of people who came from different parts of the world. I mean, of the part of South Africa who were then joining Mgijima and AmaSirayeli in Ntabelanga. Firstly,
mostly from
when I was
mostly from chiefly clans.
Yes, I wanted to interrogate that. We know that when I was speaking on this issue, I think it was last week on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm not sure. We did highlight and showed some of the names of people. Most of those names were not most. The names included the Sotho surnames. They included the Nguni surnames, and so from that perspective, we are speaking about the unity of African people in this part of the world. But the second point that you're talking about is you're talking about these people were coming from royal households and chieftains' lands. And why do you think that is important for people to understand that ukufika kwabantu eNtabelanga zange kufike imigqutsa pere yozankcenkce abantu abangenangqondo, especially on the basis that the Western historiographical narrative around Enoch Mgijima referred to AmaSirayeli as a helpless followers, as an ignorant bunch of people who were, and they also referred to Mgijima as a misguided visionary so-called prophet. Now, why do you think it is important that we do make mention of this type of people? Ingabe ngathi besithetha nje ngabantu abangosiputso ozanqenqa abantu abaphoswa ngapha nangapha.
No. Abantu, I won't mention everybody, but okay, let me rather not mention people's surnames and their clans. But there were people there in Ntabelanga who came from the Tembu royal house. There were people in Ntabelanga who came from different royal families. Kwakuko onyana baka Mthombeni. We'll use that word Mthombeni because the popular one is not known. Kwakuko onyana baka Mthombeni in Ntabelanga who came from all the way up north. Bengakwazi not isiXhosa, and they went to follow Mgijima. It goes back to the period between the birth of Mprofeti 1868 to around about before the turn of, is it the century, the 1900, in 1879, the period between his birth in 1868 to 1879, let me just put it that way, that we saw we saw a string of events of collapse of royal authorities, collapse of kingdoms throughout Southern Africa. And there was only one perpetrator for that, and that was the British imperialist machine. And people came to Enoch Mgijima for different reasons, right? And I tend to believe that the chiefs, mostly the chiefs, they came to Enoch because they had lost their power, you know. And I hate to say this, but it is a common fact that the ordinary man doesn't fight for the chief. The ordinary man fights for the moral leader. We know that Nxele wayemkhokhelisa kakhulu uNxele ezimfanzweni zakhe, because our people, because we are a people of knowledge, like we come from a culture of knowledge, we tend to gravitate towards a moral authority. And in this time, in this instant, the only word that we have for that now is a prophet. So people tend to gravitate towards the prophet, you know. So I think that he attracted a lot of chiefs or people from royal families, because they knew that the common men tend to gravitate towards abantu abafana no Enoch Mgijima. And I guess at that time they were looking for anyone who was willing to stick it up to the European authority or the British imposition. So yeah, that should take care of that. But that's my personal opinion. I don't have any historical facts of that, but it is a well-known fact that Enoch a large following from the aristocrats of that time.
And then how do you, if you then had a large following of the aristocrats at the time, sometimes we tend to miss certain archival material as a person who is so infatuated with history and sources. We tend to miss a lot of archival material, maybe written sources, written work, and all that. And nalapha enkonzweni kukho i-documents esingazaziyo, izinto ezingabhalwanga and all that. And then somebody would then bring about, they say, but these people were aristocrats, and also they were also educated individuals who were part and parcel of the group. How did then the church end up missing some of these particular things of importance? Because some of the things zebandla AmaSirayeli are not written down. How would you then view that in the context of the time?
No, that's a mistake that we make. We think Nkonzo is not documented. Nkonzo is extensively documented. You know, kubhaliwe kakhulu ngamaSirayeli from inside and outside. This is a sensitive issue in terms of like documentation. Documentation yenkonzo, but there are families or people who think good like property up, and that is wrong. Xa kubhalwa enkonzweni, xa bebefika abantu enkonzweni ntabelanga, kwakubhalwa, babhalwe ukuthi basuka phi, kubhalwe history yabo and everything. Everything was documented in Ntabelanga. And these things were supposed to be kept enkonzweni etempileni after Tempile was built. And it is a common knowledge that kukho abantu abazithathelayo ezincwadini zenkonzo, and they need to bring them back. I'm being personal. They need to bring them back because that is not a personal property. information yenkonzo. It's information yenkonzo, property yenkonzo. Ikubhaliwe ngenkonzo extensively mhlali ngaphambili. It's a misconception to say that into yaseNtabelanga was not recorded.
And if that is the case, how does that impact negatively then on the perception that has grown outside? By today, we are even able to, after many years, over 102 years, where it's only now that we are outrightly complaining or outrightly repudiating the massacreness of the Bulhoek. If these elements were written down, what is the impact, therefore, of not making these public, but they become private? Because had these issues been in the forefront, probably even the authority, I'm saying authority of the Bulhoek story, Robert Edgar, would have probably understood it on the basis of Ibi Mfazwe Mgijima, Ibi Mfazwe yaseNtabelanga, not necessarily it was a massacre. Or those who came after him would have been able to say, okay, after Robert Edgar, then these are the records of the time, and therefore it's no longer Mfazwe Massacre, but Mfazwe yaseNtabelanga. What is the impact of holding on to the information about the church, and the impact of holding on to the information? How does that affect negatively on how people perceive the church?
It's not important to Iban. Going back to the issue of language, when you say church, that's got in today's world, even if you Google it on Google, it's got different implications to the original concept of church. So when we speak about Ibandla likaMgijima, we speak about Intlanganiso, the congregation that is Ibandla likaMgijima, the community. Some people within the church, they hate it when you use that word. That inkonzo in itself is not a church. Inkonzo is a moral community of people who have who share the same moral authority. And I always pointed out to my Muslim friends, and I said the most powerful thing about Islam is that Islam is a moral authority. And us as the black race, as abantu abamnyama, we can't point out the moral authority and say so and so is our moral authority. We abide by his teaching. We can never say that according to imiyalelo kabani or imfundiso kabani, this is what we believe in as abantu abamnyama. And as AmaSirayeli Mgijima, we have that fortune. Elo Tamsana analo nala amaslams lokuthi sikwazi ukuthi kaseta sithi according to the teachings of Enoch Mgijima, according to imfundiso zikaMgijima. But then because that information has been lost, you end up people even inside inkonzo athi umuntu ngize inkonzweni yakaSirayeli mina but andizanga kuMgijima. Ubone ba ke ngoku we have a problem ke ngoku, because kaloko how can you join uApla or can you join PAC kanti awuzumfuna usobukwe? Enoch Mgijima isn't just a founder of our movement, but he's our moral authority. And so the implication of this hogging of information in Nkonzo is that abantwana benkonzo don't have the opportunity that I had where I grew up in Nkonzo at the time, abantu abadala. And one of the things that we were taught in Nkonzo from an early age is to listen, because abantu abadala, in Nkonzo there's a process where abantu bayaphakama bathethe. Abantu abadala, they will relate the information that some of us absorbed. They will relate it, then they stand in front of us and tell us what happened in Ntabelanga and so on and so on. So that is the hogging of information in Nkonzo by certain individuals is dangerous to the future in Nkonzo, because it robs abantwana, the future generation, of an opportunity to learn about Nkonzo.
It continues to rob, because it has robbed others as well. It has robbed us as well, and therefore people end up doing things the way they want to do them, because they feel that we will take whatever that is available out there, and let me leave it at that. Look, in your understanding, therefore, is that the Bulhoek Massacre cannot be separated from Enoch Mgijima. And Enoch Mgijima cannot be.
Movement. It cannot be separated from the colonial resistance movement.
I wanted to put that as well, to say and Enoch Mgijima cannot be separated from that particular that colonial resistance movement, even from a religious or spiritual perspective, but also even from a political or socio-cultural perspective. It just cannot be. Now, you've got people who are on social media that look and consider abatata banxiba impahla ezinjanjani. They look at them and they say, these men are wearing ilokwe. They're wearing these dresses and all of these things, these particular uniforms. Do you perhaps have something to say around this issue?
Yes.
Because again, social media has caused us to answer these questions, because they kept on asking them to say, hey, gutata kabani ngokulu unxibe iskate phakathi kwabantu. At that time, kuthiwa ngutata omdala ude wanazo i-mustache and all that. So do you have something to say in relation to izinxibo zenkonzo?
I need to remind them that uHahabe wayenxiba iskate, and we know this because S.E.K. Mqhayi has one of his poems. He says that. He said uHahabe wayenxiba iskate. Wayenxiba, I think he says wayenxiba ezifutshane ngoba ezinto zazimgquba amadoda. The context of ukunxitywa kwesinxibo esasinxitywa enkonzweni should not be viewed separately from or should not be taken out of the cultural context. Inkonzo yakaSirayeli, which we tend to call it inkonzo yakaSirayeli, but I prefer to say ibandla likaMgijima okanye impi kaMgijima, or let's say ibandla likaMgijima. Ibandla likaMgijima, what they do, those people there, that's their culture. I don't understand why people will not have a problem with someone on this page, but they will have a problem with someone on the iskaka sakwaSirayeli. I do not understand that part, because even inkonzo yamanazari, they to some certain extent wear skirts that are similar to us. I think that we should not view people the trending of inkonzo, or whatever you call it, like the mockery. I don't like the word mockery, because I don't think those people are mocking inkonzo, but I would say the mockery. We should not view the mockery yenkonzo with social media as an insult to people or as an insult to the community, but we should view it in the sense that people want to know. People want to know why Snoopy's gate, and the explanation of what Snoopy's gate is very simple. It goes back to the context they came from different tribes. They had different so that is our cultural attire. It's easy for us now to think with like babenxibe ilokwe, but please consider the fact that abantu bexesha lakhe babenxibe izibheshu.
Isn't it easy for us as a people, especially of modern age, to ridicule things that we don't know? Because sometimes I think it makes it easy, because if we don't know, then we place it at a certain category. Isn't it easy?
It stems from Westernization. That's the strategy of the West, to ridicule what they don't understand. You must understand the Western mentality is based on conformity. You must conform by common standards. So the moment abantu babona into it different, they will ridicule it to an extent that abanye ridicule not knowing ukuthi it's who they are. That's who we are. We're not. I like to relate the story. Yoguti shortly before Ukchona Kwement, Ukutwa is the ship that was sinking. Our ancestors who were there, on that ship, they were wearing like military uniform. They all came from different tribes, but they were wearing a military uniform. But as the ship started sinking, Kutwa, they gathered in one place and they stripped off those clothes and they started doing the war dance. I think the pastor or the clergy at that time, who was also black, said to the men, remember that the death that you were going to? They said, yeah. He said, it has found you. And then so they strip off their clothes and they started doing the war dance. So if I had to like theorize on my own view, is that India Sentabelang was a rejection of Western standards, right? Or should I say, of the rejection of Western morals and values. How can you then reject Western morals and values and go to an extent of fighting the enemy, like physically, wearing his own clothes? So it's a presentation of the general tribal attires of that time.
So if somebody looks at all of these things, from what you're saying, even if it's 2023, if you are interpreting, analyzing, or considering Mgijima ne Bulhoek Massacre and everything that was around them, you must understand it from the context with which it was emanating from.
Yes, culturally, economically, we didn't touch the economical context. Historical context. You should take those things into perspective and put them into view, because those people were not doing. Those people are not just doing indo abangayazi. They had a purpose, and there was a reason they were doing what they were doing. The common understanding is that abantu bayintabelanga babelwela umhlaba intabelanga, and that is that's actually the narration. That's the Western narration. Ukuthi abantu babelwela umhlaba, abantu babengalwela umhlaba. Enkonzweni mna ndikhule abantu besithi xa bengqina bechaza imvelaphi yabo as members zezenkonzo. Athi utata omkhulu wami wayentabelanga washiya inkomo zakhe nomhlaba wakhe. And they went to Ntabelanga because they understood one thing that we don't understand, Tina, living in our days, is that the people of that time, they understood that the real estate. So when you say that Babelwela umhlaba, then you're talking about the real estate under their feet. But they understood that the real estate under your hair was more important than the real estate under your feet. So they forfeited their lands and their cows. Even my family forfeited their lands and their cows by Ntabelanga, because they understood the power that in order for you to be free, you must be free here.
Thanks for that. You say it is important that freedom must begin with the mind before it can get to anywhere else, and I love that. When you look at this particular, there was a point that I wanted to interrogate again with you around the issue yase Ntabelanga, and ibisuka apha kule ndaba yezinxibo, yabo, and the context with which everything else was happening. Here is it. At some point there was a narration that, or a narrative that said Mgijima said abantu mabayolwa but imbumbulu zizawuphuma amanzi. And also there was also another narrative where it says that Mgijima, when he got arrested, he was arrested wearing women clothing, so a women dress, as he was hiding from the police and all that. in the context of the time, how would you respond to a person who makes those particular critiques to say, actually, Mgijima was not a prophet. He was misleading people. Why did he say Imbumbulu is our Pumamans? And then at the end, the firearms did not, but actually killed people. And also, why did he run away and go and hide himself under women wearing women clothing? Do you have a perspective on these particular points?
The Western strategy to discredit our leader has always been like ridicule, but they're not really creative about it, because the same stories that they told about Mgijima, the same stories they told about Nxele, that Nxele wathi imiphi izawujika ibullets izawujika zibe ngamanzi. And the same story they told about Mgijima wearing Ilokwe was the same story they told about Unika when he turned against them. And they always like kind of like recycles the stories when they're trying to like discredit our leaders. What was the other story that they told about Mgijima? Oh, Mgijima never asked people to fight. He tried to stop them. He never asked people to fight, but people were fed up with Britain. They were fed up with colonialism. He said to them, akuzudlala ngoswazi lolapesi, indoda izawutsiba phezu kwamathumbu omntu amthandayo. And people didn't care. And even when he said, one of the things that he said, Mgijima, shortly before the start, he said, madoda ndizibonile ndiboyiwe. And those men said that he was inciting them to fight. When he said to them, I saw myself being handcuffed. And they said, you will be handcuffed over our dead bodies, because they've seen Makoma being handcuffed. They've seen Langalbalele being handcuffed and not coming back, or coming back and then dying. And they've seen Tlajoya being handcuffed. And they've seen a lot of their leaders being handcuffed by the British imperial machine. And the people are saying, no, but it's not going to happen this time. And that's why people fight. This thing, Yoguti, and it's a distraction from the actual thing that happened there. Those people came to arrest Mgijima, and the people are saying over our dead bodies. That's basically what happened there.
And you are saying the theme of everything that you're talking about is resistance.
Resistance.
In the current order, then,
what was the unification?
Okay, proceed with that thought of Mgijima's achievement.
His achievement of unifying the tribes. Abantu abanjengo Oba Ufuze, Makwaza Fuze, one of our early academics and really thinkers, they tried it and they failed. It was only later that abanjengo Albert Lutuli, they managed to unify the people. But it was hard in Mgijima, because people are not identifying as abantu abamnyama. Like I said before, this notion of what do you call it? This notion of categorizing abantu racially by skin color is new to us. Umdu omnyama meant at the time of Mgijima and earlier, the concept or the phrase umdu omnyama meant different to a Xhosa, and it had no racial connotation. And the same concept of umdu omnyama, it meant completely different from someone from present day KZN. To the Zulus and the Hlubis, saying umdu omnyama, like we say of Utajwa, situ chinondo mnyama, it means a beautiful person, to the extent that AmaHlubi, when they moved to the Eastern Cape, the Xhosas didn't understand when they said that singamahlubi amnyama. They ended up saying singamahlubi amahle, right? Because to them, where they come from, to be umnyama, the really concept of being like umdomnyama means like a beautiful person. Whereas emaXhoseni, that concept, and you can easily pick this up, like the concept emaXhoseni umdomnyama was a commoner. You couldn't say that umdomnyama. You couldn't like identify to racially by skin color. So that was what leaders or actually what Mgijima achieved was he unified them. but he was sort of like a pioneer in that field. But the thing that Abantu then struggled afterwards was that they needed to rally the people above and beyond their tribal like separations. So skin color was the only option, but it was difficult for people to identify as Umtomnyama because the concept was new to us of identifying myself racially by skin color. You understand? And someone else will come and say, and so people came in Tabelanga with that attitude. And then Enoch said, Oti lona lihlubi, lona ngumthembu, lona ngumXhosa, yinja le.
I see.
I need to explain the concept of inja in this phrase.
In this phrase, yes.
In this phrase, the concept of inja is esixhoseni umuntu ongenabuntu yinja le. So he was saying ukuthi by separating yourself by tribe by tribal distinction, ayibobuntu or in that concept. But esixhoseni inja means a lot of things, but it was never isithuk. It's only in our time that it's isithuk.
I'll come back to the modern times. We've got a comment from my sister, Urubi Nkopo. I think in the next installment we need a presentation on Mgijima's philosophy and the Church of God and Saints of Christ doctrine. Like you rightly put it, Muslims refer to Muhammad. What was Mgijima's vision? I think that is the question that if you are able to answer, what was Mgijima's vision? What was his objective? Maybe that is something that we can think about. And if you've got some view on it, you can answer. If not, okay.
Is there going to be a second date?
I don't know. Probably you might not have a second date, but okay. I think it's a good submission about the Mgijima's philosophy and all that. I think it's a good proposal.
Okay, no problem.
But are you able to have probably a vision, or are you able to give us a Mgijima's vision on what he was trying to do? Because Ruby is asking us, if you're able to answer the question, it's okay, but if not, it's fine.
I think, as the commenter suggests, we should put it for another session if possible, because I wasn't even prepared for this session. I came on the premise that I was going to talk about the context Mgijima. The other thing that we should be like very wary about it is that in Nkonzo, as it is right now in Israel, has is struggling in terms of like a doctrine. Doctrine in Nkonzo, it is well known by people, but there's a pressure from within the church, from certain individuals, either by sheer ignorance or I don't know, by being people wanting to assimilate with the world. People want to pull Nkonzo away from it doctrine or imfundiso zomprofit, and they want to introduce what is generally being known by the world. I want to avoid the word Christianity, but people want us to adopt like the teachings that are similar to other churches. I don't want to say they want us to adopt the Christianity, but Nkonzo Israeli was formed to phikisa yonke loo nto. Nkonzo Israeli was formed to phikisa missionarism. Nkonzo Israeli inayo idoctrine yayo.
Idoctrine yayo is?
Idoctrine Nkonzo opposes idoctrine yelizwe. Doctrine Nkonzo is the of the word.
If you were to speak to a contemporary, a modern South African who has never heard of Enoch Mgijima, Bulhoek Massacre, and Ibandla AmaSirayeli, Inkonzo AmaSirayeli, or Inkonzo Mgijima, as you want to put it, how would you tell them about this particular Ibandla AmaSirayeli, the Bulhoek Massacre, and Mgijima, the modern person.
A modern South African, the average modern South African doesn't even know who he is. I would not go to an extent of explaining Nkonzo. The Western notion is that you know, like in the West, I was on Twitter at some point, but I noticed that people feel like when you say something, you need to explain it to them. That's not the Eastern standard. I'm not supposed to explain anything to you. You know, so as Nkonzo, we're not supposed to explain it to people. But what we suggest is that start by knowing yourself. Isintu, it's all the Eastern cultures, including Isintu, Sepere, is Arab, Islams, and all of those Eastern cultures, is China, is Japan, are all knowledge-based cultures. And Isintu in specific, the highest form of knowledge is self-knowledge. Before you can understand Nkonzo Israel, try to understand yourself. Who are you? Because it will be hard to explain to you who I am if you don't understand who are you in the first place. I would like to add here.
And the point is the point is you feel like it is something that is intrinsic in us to as a people, that for one to be able to get a sense of even Mgijima himself, it is important that at least a person must know where do they come from. I think that's what you are saying. But let's go to the last part of my conversation. When you spoke to me again yesterday, you were speaking about when you look at and you compared Nxele, Ntsikana Kagaba, no Enoch Mgijima. Would you, to an extent, who? Nomlanje, yes. Just talk to me about those characters, and why did you characterize them the way that you did?
I said to you after the conversation last night, I wish you had recorded that conversation, because there's one of the is Takazeros on Prophet, Enoch Mgijima. We say of itola lenyaniso, right? And I've looked up the word itola, and I'm not going to use it in for fear they mightn't know about that. But the people that lived in times of Mgijima and the people that lived before him, they fought for ideas. They didn't fight for materialistic things like the land and this and that. They fought for ideas. We know this because Imfazwe Kayinza, and how he started, I stand corrected, but how it started was knowing that the people won't fight for the land. They sent out one of Ngeka's sons to the land that was confiscated in Abelungu, and Abelungu shot him. And when he came back, the first Xhosa he actually saw him and ran back to his house and came back wearing the war regalia, because they considered the shooting of the chief as an insult to the sovereignty of their tribe. So they fought for ideas. Those people, they didn't fight for materialistic things. And so during the time Nxele, wayelitola lalo mihla. Depend on you how you want to interpret it all. But people gravitated to him because he had clarity to some of their obscurities, because they were getting these new ideas about that were being brought by missionaries. But Nxele was militaristic in nature. And so Ntsikana was raised as opposition to that. And so what then happened is, we know their story because it was covered by mostly people who were tribally on the side Ntsikana, AmaNgqika. right? But while in Islam. So the way we view them today was that they were like, especially in Ntsikana, why are you Christian? Ntsikana, why isn't Christian? Ntsikana wasn't a Christian, but what he was doing was a response towards Christianity. I'm not going to say it was anti, but it was a response. All the advanced cultures in the world, or civilization in the world, they had only one thing in common. Whenever they confronted by a new idea, they didn't completely reject it. They will take it and then adopt it and try to fit it within their moral code, and try to see ukuthi how can it, rather than destroy, but actually empower their existing customs and moral values. And that was what Nxele was trying to do when he designed his conception of God. He was trying to oppose the new ideas that were being brought by the missionaries. And that was Ntsikana what he was trying to do. And exactly that was what Enoch was trying to do. As much as it was resistance to colonialism, there was also some kind of a response to the missionary message. It was a response to the missionary message. So when you talk about those people, you can't separate them. You can't separate them. Ntsikana was a resistant. I mean, Nxele was a resistant leader. Ntsikana was a resistant leader. In the same token, as uMaqoma was a resistant leader, or Enoch Mgijima was a resistant leader. But the difference could be that Nxele was militaristic, and Ntsikana was more like not timid, but more of like trying to pacify the people. And what I said to you is Enoch should be viewed as the combination of the two, because as much as he came for peace, but he was prepared to take his people to war for the ideas that they believed in.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you for this conversation, and I love how you interrogate some of these things, and I see why it is important for you to focus on the context of this particular issue, because for you it brings about a certain understanding. If you don't understand how these things came about, it means therefore you will actually fail to even grasp currently how are things happening how the things happened in the church, how the things are happening in the church, how were things happening in the world, and how are things were happening in the world during that time. Now, as your closing remarks, your parting shot, give us your parting shot.
My parting shot is to the TikTokers. Be ready, in the next year we're going to wear the same dress, and then we're going to dance the same dance. And the year after that, we're going to do the same thing. And that's my parting remark. We are never going to stop. Just because you mock it, we're not going to stop what we're doing. It's our culture.
A century ago, more than 160 people perished here in a hail of police bullets. They had claimed the land for worship. The families of the victims lament the slow pace of land redistribution.
And thank you for those wonderful words. I'm sorry for that technical glitch. I'm not sure what was going on there as we were, but I enjoyed the conversation with you, my brother. Siyabulela kakhulu for your teachings and learnings, and I hope that those people who are watching and those who are watching with us on Ponte Politique were able to get a little bit of something, even if they did not grasp everything that you've said, but at least there's something that they have come out of it, and there's something that they have learned from it. And also further recommendations. If somebody has a recommendation in relation to the conversation, please put across your comments and your questions on the on the chat box, so that we can be able to continue with the conversation outside of this particular platform. Mntaka Masiba Mkhwana, ndoda enkulu,
Yes, sir.
siyabulela kakhulu bhuti for making the
Bulela.
time. Akwaba amanyange nabantu abakhulu bangakugcina bakulondoloza bakuphi ingqondo Fondeni. Uthethe kakuhle ngolu hlobo uthetha ngalo ngoba umlindi kaSirayeli nangabantwana bebandla likaThixo nengcwele zikaKristu akukhulise kwezo ndawo zonke unqwenela ukukhula kuzo kudede ubumnyama kuvela ukukhanya. Siyacamagusha ke ngoba nabantu abanjengani apha endleleni. Thank you very much, my brother. We appreciate your presence in this conversation, and we loved each and every moment of it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
You have heard this conversation that we've had with our brother Odwa Masiba, and I hope that you were able to get something, to get a sense of who is Mgijima, why is it Bulhoek Massacre, why am I contesting also? I've been contesting it, that it is a Bulhoek Massacre, and some of the other things that Odwa was talking about. And I think if one were to say, I would say that mhlambi ndahamba ndayoba phaa kuye kulaa ngqondo yakhe ezinye izinto ndazithatha even though it's the first time that we spoke about this particular issue of Bulhoek Massacre, Mgijima and AmaSirayeli with him. But thank you very much for joining us, and I appreciate that you were part of this conversation once again. Umntungwa umalingu undima kankumbuzo uyengwayo uthi kuni once more. Thank you very much, and we'll see each other another time. All the best. We are closing off with this particular video. Bye.
A century ago, more than 160 people perished here in a hail of police bullets. They had claimed the land for worship. The families of the victims lament the slow pace of land redistribution.